Your Royal Highness, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to celebrate the International Day of Forests. We will start with a 1-minute video spot that is being broadcasted by the main international news channels. Can we have the video, please?
When we take steps to restore a forest, we play a part in something much bigger. We're making a better world for our health and for the health of future generations. By replanting and managing our forests sustainably, we create new spaces where plants and animals can thrive. We promote economic activity that brings work and improves lives. We make a real impact on climate change. We improve the quality of the air we breathe, the food we eat, and water we drink. We create a healthy environment for our children to grow. It's never too late to take action. Let's restore our forests and create a better future.
Thank you. Your Royal Highness, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we have today a very special program for this celebration. We will open with a high-level panel that will discuss the very theme of the International Day of Forests, forest restoration, a path to recovery and well-being. Before we start, let me recap on the Zoom etiquette. Please follow the meeting in mute mode and click the unmute button only when speaking. Note also that interpretation is available in the 6 official FAO languages and can be selected in the bottom bar under the globe symbol. Finally, participants have an opportunity to actively contribute to the discussion through the chat function. Kindly note also that the event is recorded and it will be available on the website of the International Day of Forests, and the link will be pasted in the chat. I would now like to turn to introduce our moderator, Ms. Fiona Harvey. She is an award-winning journalist who has covered environment matters since 2004 at the Financial Times and then for The Guardian. Among the numerous awards and recognitions, she has twice won the Foreign Press Association's award for the Environment Story of the Year. Ms. Harvey, we are very delighted to have you with us today. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that very kind introduction there. And yes, I'm going to be moderating a panel of very distinguished speakers this morning. We're delighted at the lineup who's joining us, and we're all going to be talking on this theme of restoration, which sometimes has been a bit neglected in the past. We know about deforestation, afforestation, but sometimes the theme of restoration has got a bit lost. We'll be remedying that today because that's what we're talking about. And so, first of all, I'd like to bring in our very distinguished opening speaker, who you'll know as Kyu Dong-yu, the Director General of the Food and Agriculture Organization. Please.
Okay, Your Royal Highness, Princess Basma, and thank you for your joining us. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I'm pleased to open the celebrations for the International Day of Forests 2021, which shines the spotlight on the forest restoration as a path to recovery and well-being. I have 3 messages I would like to share with you today. The first message is that the healthy forests means healthy people. Forests provide us with fresh air, nutritious food, clean water, space for recreation, and also for the civilization to continue. More than 1 billion people depend on the forest food directly, and 2.4 billion people use firewood or charcoal to cook their daily meals. Forests are also green pharmacies in developing nations. Up to 80% of all medicine drugs are plant-based, and it's huge potential for the future, how to get the new genes new value of the chemical components from the forestry and the ecosystems, of course, biodiversity. Well, it comes to the well-being of people in the cities. It's estimated that the trees provide the magnet cities with benefit worth $500 million or more every year. That's only economic value estimate. But if you look at the holistic value or overall value, it's something you can't measure by money. Yeah? And also, more important, in my opinion now, is by reducing air pollution, cooling buildings, and provide a green space for the recreation and learning, and also for the people who live in the good and happy, pleasure environment. And also there is a tourist, cultural, even spiritual dimensions to this benefit. And that's why a lot of people wanted to travel into the mountains, forest areas, which is also relief for your pressure, psychological pressure. My second message is that the area of forest continues shrinking. FAO most recent Global Forest Resources Assessment tells us that each year the world lost more than 10 million hectares of forest. This is affecting climate, biodiversity, and people. Deforestation, land degradation cost more than 10% of annual global GDP in lost ecosystem services. The loss of forests also impacts people's health. Nearly 1 in 3 outbreaks of emergency infectious disease is directly linked to the land use change, such as deforestation. The risks of new pandemics will continue to increase if we continue with business as usual. My third message is that we can change this. We have the knowledge and tools. Restoring forests and managing them more sustainably is a cost-effective option to provide multiple benefits for both people and the planet. Investments in forest restoration, promoting agroforestry, will contribute to the economic recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic by creating green jobs, generating livelihoods, green cities, increasing food security. The Greater Green Wall for the Sahara and the Sahel initiative, led by the African Union, is one such example, supported strongly by FAO. By 2030, it aims to restore 100 million hectares of land across Africa dryland, while sequestering 250 million tons of carbon and create 10 million green jobs. Other countries are following suit. So far, more than 60 countries have committed to restore over 210 million hectares of degraded land. However, we need to step up the pace to turn the pledges into action. So we need innovation, will help us to accelerate, deliver, and achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. That's why we have appointed the first chief scientist in FAO history, established an office for innovation, and to facilitate the adoption of the innovative approach and the use of modern science and technology, including digital solutions. And innovation can take the form of new technologies such as delphinol plow, currently used in speed up land preparation in Sahara. It can also be a new approaches, such as supporting the restoration investment and their returns through the Communal Council in Nigeria, which has opened the restoration windows in the budget of communes. And also we need the innovation of mind, looking beyond the specific technical field of work. And I said so many times, forest, it's not only plant trees. It's not only protect the forest and that simple. I said we should look holistically, and also we should look at the as a complicated and organic interlinkage system. You know, the system science tells us if we look at the big system, and then we have a different specific professional systems. And that is a complexity of the ecosystem. So, and we have to rebuild, restore the ecosystem by systematic way, not only by the plant tree that simple. And of course, we need also cross-cutting cooperation, cross-sector cooperation, and also bring about the solid governance at the country level, at the regional level, and the global level. Taking advantage of big data also make the differences. FAO is the forefront of development tools, provide access to satellite data and super computing power to strengthen evidence-based decision-making, supporting action on the ground and monitor progress. We are presently leading the work of more than 200 experts in 86 organizations, setting up a system to monitor progress on the actions taken as part of a UN decade of ecosystem restoration. That has just begun. And I think also in that sense, we have to offer our long-term commitment. I said to the forest people, it takes generations to restore to the whole system. So that's why we need a long-term commitment. Harnessing the power of shared knowledge and enabling concrete joint action. Now, forest restoration offers a solution to build back better and achieve the future we want. Let us all become the part of the generations restoration and restore the planet for better production, better nutrition, a better environment, and a better life. And finally, we can have a better world and a better civilization to continue. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you very much indeed, Director General, for that great introduction. I'd like to move on now to continue with the panel. And it's my great pleasure to introduce our next speaker, who is Her Royal Highness Princess Basma bint Ali of the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan. The Princess has a strong background in conservation and biodiversity work. For instance, she has been the recipient of many international recognitions, including the Henry Shaw Medal, and she's been named a hero for the planet. She's also ambassador of the Black Jaguar Foundation, which I know does a great deal of work on creating biodiversity corridors, which are so important for endangered species. Today, she's going to talk to us about why restoration is so important. So, Your Royal Highness, I'd like to ask you the first question. Why is restoration so important? Why now, in particular? And what's in it for the well-being of people? Please.
Thank you very much, Fiona. First, I'd like to extend my great gratitude to the FAO and Director General and Your Excellencies for celebrating the International Day of Forest by putting this event together and having me participate in such a highly esteemed panel. Well, to be quite honest, ecological restoration is the most cost-effective mechanism we have at hand, and it enables us to restore the ecosystem services upon which humans have relied on for centuries, and we still do rely on them, regardless of how technologically advanced we may become. We will always rely on nature for our livelihoods. And for example, if we take the regulating services, which in the past we took for granted, it has become ever so important now. In light of climate change, we are feeling the negative effects of not doing so in the past. And if we really hold true to the Agenda 2030, that leaving no one behind and trying to shift both economies and societies down the sustainable development pathway, I think that restoration is the key because it's accessible, it's an integrated approach, it's very coherent approach as well. and it helps us facilitate to achieve the SDGs. Why now? Sadly, I must say that we are the last generation that can turn the tide. We are at the tipping point, and it's our duty as to actualize our role as stewards of the earth. And I've witnessed this, you know, and it doesn't take much to actually achieve it. Yes, as the Director General said, it takes generations in regards of forests, but we can reap the benefits at a very, very fast pace if we just give nature a chance. And I've witnessed this both in Jordan, through the rangeland, through the work of the Royal Botanic Garden, the community-based rangeland rehabilitation program, where we restored the rangelands, which includes forested areas. And I'll talk about that on a bit later. And as you mentioned, the Black Jaguar Foundation, which has embarked on one of the longest biodiversity corridors in the Araguaia River. And I love the way how it's because it's integrative, we also include local communities, which are at the very core of restoration. And I would also like to highlight the importance of including their access and the benefit sharing of the benefits of these systems that the local communities and the native communities have a right to achieve. So we shouldn't also forget that. So restoration bridges the farmer, the local native community, and biodiversity, and it's a win-win situation for all.
Thank you very much indeed, Your Royal Highness. That was a great introduction to why restoration is so important. And we're going to move on now to Claude Nyamagubo Bazibuha, who is Minister of Environment and Sustainable Development in the Democratic Republic of Congo. He's been a minister experience in this field. So I'm going to start with the question, can you briefly tell us, please, Minister, about the main current forest and landscape restoration initiatives in your country? Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Madame, et merci à l'AFAO d'avoir associé la République démocratique du Congo à cette réunion importante sur les forêts. L'importance de la République démocratique du Congo n'est plus à démontrer dans le cadre de la protection de la planète par ces forêts. À noter que la République démocratique du Congo a 155 millions d'hectares de forêt et donc est le deuxième poumon de la planète. Je voudrais commencer par une initiative toute nouvelle du président de la République, Félix Antoine Tshisekedi, qui depuis son investiture a mis sur pied une initiative appelée Jardin scolaire pour 1 milliard d'arbres à l'horizon 2023. Et cette initiative consiste en la plantation des arbres. Et pendant son premier mandat de 5 ans, il compte planter 1 milliard d'arbres avec la jeunesse de la République démocratique du Congo. Je voudrais également épingler d'autres initiatives comme celle de la poursuite du processus de réduction des émissions dues à la déforestation et à la dégradation des forêts, qui est le processus RED en cours en République démocratique du Congo. Épingler également la diversification des sources d'énergie renouvelables par la lutte contre la déforestation à travers l'utilisation du gaz domestique. En effet, nous nous sommes rendus compte qu'il y avait un taux de déboisement qui s'accélérait à travers les pays et surtout autour de la capitale Kinshasa. Et le ministère de l'Environnement a mis sur pied un processus qui consiste à vulgariser l'usage du gaz domestique en vue de réduire la pression de l'homme sur les forêts autour de Kinshasa. Et je voudrais dire que ce processus connaît un franc succès, étant donné qu'à Kinshasa actuellement, la plus grande partie de la population utilise les gaz domestiques. Épingler également l'élaboration en cours de la politique nationale, la politique forestière nationale, qui contiendra un axe stratégique d'intervention relatif à l'afforestation, la reforestation et la restauration des paysages forestiers en République démocratique du Congo. Et cela conduira à la révision du code forestier. Une cinquième initiative, c'est la consolidation du système national de surveillance des forêts, la protection des tourbières et les potentialités en biodiversité en République démocratique du Congo. Une sixième initiative, c'est l'opérationnalisation du projet de l'économie verte et de l'économie bleue en Afrique centrale. Et enfin, l'opérationnalisation du Conseil consultatif national des forêts. Voilà, Madame, les 7 initiatives principales prises par la République démocratique du Congo pour protéger ces forêts.
Thank you very much, Minister. Thank you for that view from Democratic Republic of Congo. We're going to move on now to a different part of the world. Unfortunately, Minister Andrea Meza, who's Minister for Environment and Energy in Costa Rica, can't join us live. She is, of course, an expert in sustainable development with more than 20 years of experience in formulating public policies and executing projects. And so we're going to gain an insight into some of that experience now through a video message in which she's going to discuss engaging and empowering people to use forests sustainably, how that's a key step towards positive change. So we'll see that video now, please. Thank you.
A inicios de este 2021, apenas estamos viendo una salida a la crisis sanitaria, pero la crisis climática y de biodiversidad todavía son un reto trascendental. Una solución central son los bosques, los cuales son uno de los principales almacenadores de carbono, pero también un vehículo para el desarrollo comunitario, la creación de empleos y la adaptación al cambio climático. En Costa Rica, luego de decenas de invertir recursos de nuestro presupuesto, hemos logrado detener y revertir la deforestación y aumentar la cobertura forestal con programas como las áreas silvestres protegidas y el pago de servicios ambientales. Hoy con satisfacción podemos asegurar que nuestros bosques son sumidero neto de gases de efecto invernadero. Ese es el camino que marca nuestro plan de descarbonización y su enfoque de soluciones basadas en la naturaleza. En esa ruta no podemos olvidar las millones de personas que viven en el bosque y en sus alrededores, muchas de ellas comunidades marginalizadas por años. Nuestro esfuerzo debe estar dirigido a que los bosques se conviertan en un medio para el bienestar de dichas poblaciones. Los bosques son centrales en la recuperación económica sostenible a la que apuntamos. Es necesario que los países actúen localmente, como en el caso nuestro, y que también haya movilización de recursos de origen internacional a través de programas como Red Más y otras fuentes. Desde un pequeño país en vías de desarrollo y de renta media, ubicado en el continente americano, reiteramos nuestro compromiso de asumir nuestra responsabilidad y cooperar junto con otras naciones y organismos en esta tarea vital como es mitigar y adaptarnos al cambio climático.
Thank you very much. That was a great video there. I think you may be able to watch it again on social media. I'd like to move on now. It's a slight change from our advertised program. We're now going to speak to Professor Abdoulaye Dia, who is the Executive Secretary of the Pan-African Agency of the Great Green Wall. I'm delighted to welcome you today, Professor, because we are very keen to hear about progress on the Great Green Wall. And so the question I'd like to ask you, please, is why is the restoration of the Great Green Wall so important for the well-being of the people of the Sahel? And also, can you tell us, very important question here, can you tell us if you are confident that the millions of hectares will be restored as planned? Please.
Merci beaucoup, madame. Je voudrais au préalable remercier la FAO et surtout me féliciter du partenariat fécond entre l'Agence panafricaine et la FAO, et surtout pour son engagement, l'engagement de la FAO dans la coalition internationale pour accélérer la mise en œuvre de la Grande Muraille Verte, et principalement pour son engagement, l'annonce d'engagement financier pour 238 millions de dollars, et dont 188 pour les problèmes donc de restauration et gestion durable des terres. Évidemment, quand on parle du Sahel, il faut d'abord comprendre qu'il y a une dualité entre population et ressources naturelles. C'est un lien séculaire entre les populations et évidemment donc, les ressources naturelles. Et que donc, le développement socio-économique dans cette région passe nécessairement par la mise en œuvre et le développement des ressources naturelles. Et donc, dans le cadre de la Grande Muraille Verte, un des éléments clés et un des piliers, évidemment, pour acquérir et aboutir au développement socio-économique et par ricochet également à sécurité donc, dans la région, c'est un peu d'abord la restauration, la récupération et surtout le développement donc, des ressources naturelles. Pour nous, la restauration, ces ressources naturelles doivent passer par une restauration à grande échelle. Et quand je dis restauration, ça veut dire qu'il faut réhabiliter les ressources naturelles, les services écosystémiques, mais également les réintégrer dans les processus, évidemment, dans les systèmes agro-silvo-pastoraux, évidemment, donc de production. Et c'est ainsi que, évidemment, pour nous, et dans notre plan d'investissement prioritaire, nous avons mis l'accent sur le nexus entre restauration, gestion durable des terres, ensuite, gestion intégrée des ressources naturelles et tout ce qui concerne donc le développement de l'agroécologie et de l'agroforesterie. Et donc, pour nous, c'est un élément important et un élément central dans le développement et dans l'approche de développement et de sécurité au niveau donc du Sahel. Évidemment, quand on me demande toujours la possibilité, est-ce qu'il est possible et pourquoi nous pensons qu'il est possible de faire 100 millions d'hectares, nous partons d'acquis. C'est quoi l'acquis? L'acquis, c'est que donc, durant la première décennie, nous avons pu contraindre tout le processus, évidemment, de restauration et de développement, ainsi que l'intégration, évidemment, des changements climatiques. Donc, c'est un acquis. Donc, nous avons défini et nous connaissons les modalités d'une bonne restauration et nous avons mis en place des programmes à impact. Parce que la restauration au niveau de Sahel doit intégrer une approche participative des populations. Nous avons pu faire l'appropriation du projet par les populations. Donc, les populations s'intègrent et acceptent aussi bien les femmes que les jeunes pour intégrer donc évidemment ce processus. Le fait d'avoir plusieurs milliards, ça ne permet pas de faire la restauration si les populations ne suivent pas. Donc, nous avons réglé ce problème. Deuxième élément, pourquoi c'est possible? Parce qu'au-delà de ça, ce qui avait un peu ralenti, évidemment, la restauration et nos activités, c'était manque de moyens. Si nous arrivons à transformer les annonces en actions concrètes sur le terrain, nous sommes à même de pouvoir, évidemment, réaliser, évidemment, cette ambition, cette forte ambition d'une vision, évidemment, à la fois écologique, à la fois humaniste, mais également à la fois climatique qui devrait nous permettre d'aboutir à un développement résilient au niveau donc de ces deux terroirs et qui ferait donc non seulement qui nous permettrait de lutter contre tous les stress que vivent ces populations, mais également on peut arriver donc vers évidemment un développement inclusif au niveau de ces populations. pour les populations au niveau du Sahel, il faut voir le lien ombilical entre, évidemment, ressources naturelles, développement, c'est leur source d'existence, c'est leur source de subsistance, c'est le levier de développement au niveau de ça. Et donc, le programme Grande Muraille Verte se focalise surtout dans cette approche, évidemment basée sur le développement des ressources naturelles, sur les services écosystémiques, à travers un programme hardi de restauration et de récupération des terres, en l'intégrant avec la gestion durable avec la gestion intégrée des ressources en eau.
Thank you very much indeed for that, Professor. That was a very valuable insight there into what's happening with the Great Green Wall. And that leads us nicely also into our next video, which will present to us the Action Against Desertification Programme by the FAO, which shows in particular how FAO is helping local communities to restore degraded dry lands in support of and in partnership with the African Great Green Wall Initiative. We'll watch that video now, please. Great. That was a very useful video there. I'm going to move on to the second round of questions to our panelists. We're running a little bit late because we started a little bit late. So we're going to go slightly over time, but I'm going to ask our panelists to come back to me on some more detailed questions. Some aspects of them I've already heard of, but let me turn first of all back to Ku Dong-yu, Director General of the FAO, and just ask, can you tell us a little bit more about FAO's role in forestry restoration and green recovery, with special reference to climate change, please?
Thank you, Fiona. Let me start by stating up from without forest, climate goals cannot be met. Because simply forestry extract close to 12 billion tons of carbohydrate from the atmosphere each year. That is equivalent to the 1/3 of all fossil fuel emission. So their role in combating climate change is essential. Hunting the deforestation together with the science-based solution can provide 30% of mitigation needed by 2030 to stay below 2-degree increase in global temperature. I think that is not enough. We need to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees. And that's why since early this year, globally more consensus on the so-called ambitious action. I think next month they will have a big political commitment we expected. So I think the scaling up forest restoration, it's essential. It's a multiple benefit in terms of climate, human health, and the local economy. That's really a green recovery. So in Chinese, we profess nomad is a golden mount, silver mount. Once mount become green, will become a real precious mountain. Of course, FAO here, we have launched the COVID-19 response and recovery program. That's covered all the science, technology, data, human enterprises, creative to build back better. And this year it's essential for us also. We are going to have a new strategy framework and 4 betters: better production, better nutrition, and better environment, and better life. That's the 4 betters. We should depend on the forest and the good ecosystems. And of course, we need to do more together with our members. And the efforts, all the issues related to agroforestry, and also Paris Agreement in action. Yeah? We need more green funds, GCF, and GEF support. So to make this long-term mission to be realized, we need the technology, we need also investment, and we need a government action plan on the ground. And of course, we need the global share our future and by all the peoples, because we are people living on one small planet. So we need a one planet comprehensive approach. And in short, we have to look at all those aspects from the soil, especially semi-arid, arid areas, and also how to stop the soil erosion and how to make use of the water resources, and also how to build up within green approach. Not only tree, I said, we also, it depends on the region and the areas. Maybe we can plant more bush, or maybe we can plant more grass, which also is good for the biomass production. And FAO, we are ready to work together with all the key players hand in hand. And also, I said again, long-term commitment to go along with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. It's certainly good to hear of those commitments. Thank you. I'm going to go back now to Her Royal Highness Princess Basma bint Ali of Jordan again. Your Royal Highness, we heard a bit about biodiversity from you. I'd now like to ask in a little bit more detail about the complex interactions between the forest and its biodiversity in drylands. because that promotes considerations about the sustainability of different production systems. In a region like West Asia, that is one of the richest and most threatened hotspots of biodiversity, why is investing in planting trees and greening the land of such importance? Please.
Thank you, Fiona. First, let's just put things in perspective. And according to the Millennium Assessment, dry lands make up about 41.3% of land surface. And on a global level, what does that mean? That means 1 in 3 people live in dry lands. And West Asia and North Africa supports just under 200 million rural people. So the dryland population is one of the most marginalized, it's one of the most vulnerable of the peoples in the world, and they experience actually the highest infant mortality rate and the lowest rate of GNP if we talk about the gross national product per capita. However, 44% of the world's cultivated systems are in this area. So yet it is experiencing about a 70% habitat loss despite the high occurrence of crop wild relatives. And as the Director General earlier mentioned, that they're essential to us for the future as they have adaptive traits that we can benefit from in our breeding programs for food security. So if we take West Asia, only 3.2% of the land there is forest, and they're mostly fragmented, they're mostly open woodlands. And if we don't take action today, the hyper-arid regions will increase and encroach onto what is now the arid to semi-arid areas in other words, it increases desertification. So very much like what the Great Green Wall is doing, we need to take action today and do restoration programs to not end up having to do a Great Green Wall, if you see what I mean. And unfortunately, in our area, we've been experiencing extreme weather events that are becoming more and more the norm as opposed to something out of the ordinary. And that has caused the beginning of the collapse of the provisioning systems and the regulating. So thus the region will face a forced climate migration. And you can only imagine the consequences of that. And the number of people who will be vulnerable and impacted. We have to build resilience, and restoration is the first step in trying to mitigate climate change, as was mentioned earlier, and developing resilience among the most vulnerable people. So truly, every tree does absolutely matter, and ecological restoration will aid in combating this desertification, as well as protecting the watersheds in our areas. I mean, if we take Jordan as an example, 20 years ago when I started working in environment, we were ranked as the 11th most water poor country in the world. Today, we're between the first or the second. So you can imagine about an over 20 to 25 year period where we've become ranked due to water. And with climate change, the threat of climate change, this is going to be exacerbated at an exponential rate. We don't have the luxury of not doing anything. So the most efficient and successful approach is to integrate the local communities, as mentioned earlier, into the restoration programs. And they are the key to the formula, because here I would like to share with you one example also from Jordan, which is our community-based rangeland rehabilitation program. And I know we're running late, but I'll be really, really brief. What we did is, because they used to herd in the area around the Botanic Garden, we had to close off that area. It's about 200 hectares for 3 years only, just to have it rehabilitate. And we supplemented with fodder and then slowly integrated them back into the system. And this is something we've used and developed over the years. And it's based on a traditional system. So here my point is, when we look back into our tradition, we knew we have the know-how. Bring it forward to the future, integrate it to what we know today. And then we found that it increased biomass by 30%. It increased the income generation for the herding communities. which is SDG 1, no poverty, and it allowed those communities to be able to send their children to school. And it really did not cost much. So what we need to do is to develop these systems in a way that is affordable, in a way that is open to the majority of people, not complicate things, because as the professor mentioned earlier, it is costly. So we see we have the solution, but do we have the honest commitment to make the change? And this is what I'm calling for. We need to make that commitment, as the Director General said, with all our partners on the global level, because we have a stake in all of us. And it's unthinkable for us to sit back and not do anything, especially when we have the answer. And here, lastly, I would conclude, I would like to mention briefly how His Majesty King Abdullah has an initiative of the Global Charter for recognizing the rights of flora and fauna species. So even if we don't benefit as humans, it is our human role, or for humanity, that even flora and fauna have a right to live, have a right to be protected and conserved. And the final quote I would like to end is from Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he says that if the final hour reaches upon one of you while there is a sapling in your hand, then finish planting it. And this is the strongest message we can get, that to our duty to future generations is to plant trees, forests, and restore our ecosystem, because this is the only thing we will leave behind us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Royal Highness, for that very strong and clear message there and that call to duty. Thank you. We're now going to watch a video intervention from Malik Amin Aslam, who's the advisor on climate change and environment to the government of Pakistan. He will tell us about a very innovative program. It's called 10 Billion Tree Tsunami, that will not only provide timber, but also focus on the well-being and livelihoods of local people. Please.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. On this International Day for Forests, I would like to thank FAO for allowing me the opportunity to address this August gathering. The theme for this year is linking forests with the welfare of people. And I think that this is the theme that Pakistan is a country which has been following this theme for the past 6-7 years. We started it in the Billion Tree project that we initiated in our KP province in 2014. That project targeted forest restoration of about 350,000 hectares. And we took up the bond challenge with the 350,000 hectares of forest restoration. We not only met that target, but we exceeded it by going to 600,000 hectares of forest restoration. Similarly, since 2018, we have started the 10 Billion Tree Tsunami project all over Pakistan, which has got 7 different plans spread over 12 ecological zones of Pakistan. That project of the 10 Billion Tree Tsunami is targeting over 1 million hectares of forest restoration. But what is important is that both these initiatives had people at the center of the development and the protection of the forest. So they were both people-centric projects. The KP's Billion Tree initiative created 500,000 green jobs for people and youth in the nurseries, for people who were saving the forest from forest fires, and for people who were generating the saplings for the nurseries and protecting the forest. Similarly, the 10 Billion Tree Tsunami project since 2018 got hit by the COVID like everything else, but it came to the rescue of Pakistan by providing green jobs to people during the COVID lockdowns. So these were COVID safe jobs which were out in the open, protecting nature, protecting the forest, and we managed to create 85,000 jobs during this COVID era, which was a respite of fresh air for Pakistan, and the forests allowed us to do that. So as you can see, the restoration of forests goes hand in hand with the development and the well-being of the people who live in and around those forests and who get jobs in these forests. So this vision of Pakistan as Prime Minister Imran Khan of planting 10 billion trees is not just about timber. It is about people who live in these forests, and the people are benefiting from this. They're benefiting by various ways. A very recent example is the mangroves in the south of Pakistan, which have increased by 300%, the only country in the world where mangroves are increasing. Under this project, we are employing women folk, real rural women folk along the coastline who are getting jobs as protectors of these mangroves. And they are not only getting jobs but also sewing machines, because this was the incentive that they wanted. This is an innovative way of engaging the community in forest protection and making them part of the well-being of the future. So I think for us, Pakistan's message is that forests for the future are not only necessary, they are essential for our well-being. And when you think about the protection of forests, you also think about the well-being of the humans who live in it. Thank you.
Great, that was a useful video. And finally, I'm going to turn briefly again back to His Excellency Claude Nyamugabo Bazibuha of the Democratic Republic of Congo, just to ask briefly, in view of the current role of the Democratic Republic of Congo as chair of the African Union, could you briefly tell us about Africa's commitment to forest and landscape restoration, please?
Je vous remercie, Madame, encore une fois pour la question. Le président Félix Tshisekedi est actuellement le président en exercice de l'Union africaine pour toute l'année 2021. Et il faut souligner que son pays, la République démocratique du Congo, contribue à la réalisation de l'initiative des Bonnes de 2011, à travers laquelle initiative les chefs d'État du monde ont décidé de restaurer 350 millions d'hectares de forêts dégradées à l'horizon 2030. Et l'Afrique à elle seule, sur les 350 millions d'hectares, s'est engagée pour 150 millions d'hectares. Et sur les 150 millions d'hectares pour l'Afrique, la République démocratique du Congo à elle seule s'est engagée à restaurer 8 millions d'hectares d'ici 2030. Il revient donc au président en exercice de l'Union africaine, le président Félix Tshisekedi, de rappeler ses engagements de l'Afrique vis-à-vis du monde, c'est-à-dire restaurer à l'horizon 2030 350 millions d'hectares de forêt. Il le fera bel et bien lors de son mandat, vu l'importance qu'il attache à la protection de l'environnement et donc à la protection de la planète. Mais cela nécessite, encore une fois, des moyens financiers conséquents. Et ici, c'est l'occasion de parler de la compensation juste à laquelle l'Afrique a droit pour les efforts qu'elle fournit pour la protection de la planète. Les initiatives existent, mais il faut arriver à les financer pour aider l'Afrique à respecter ses engagements. C'est vrai que les gouvernements de chaque pays se sont engagés, mais je crois que plusieurs des pays ont besoin d'un appui financier pour parvenir à réaliser les engagements pris à Bonn en 2011. Voilà, madame.
Thank you very much indeed for those final remarks, Minister. That was very helpful. Now we're going to turn briefly to the European Union. We're going to have a video now from Jutta Urpilainen, Commissioner for International Partnerships at the European Commission, to talk about the European Green Deal and how it's going to affect forests globally. We'll watch that now.
Dear friends, today is the International Day of Forests. Forests are home to most of our planet's precious biodiversity on land. They also provide us shelter, jobs, food, and livelihoods. Let me thank the FAO for working with the European Union on putting forests on top of the international agenda. From the tropical rainforest of the Amazon to the snow forest of the taiga, forests hold the answers to many of our challenges. They must be at the heart of our global recovery efforts. Last month, I was delighted to sign our voluntary partnership agreement with the Republic of Honduras to improve forest governance and legality. EU aims to reduce illegal logging by strengthening sustainable forest management, improving governance, and promoting trade in legally produced timber. We want to join forces on forests, both in partnerships with countries and on the global stage. These partnerships will address forests holistically: climate, biodiversity, good governance, jobs, and sustainable trade. We have to work for both people and planet, for us and our partners. This is about protecting ecosystems and restoring what has been destroyed. It is about developing and promoting deforestation-free value chains for food security and socio-economic development. So, my friends, let us join forces for our forests and for our future.
Thank you very much for that message there. And I'm going to start wrapping up now with some closing remarks from Mette Wilkie, who's the Director of the Forestry Division at FAO. So please, give us your conclusions.
Thank you so much, Fiona, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody. Your Royal Highness, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we have been listening to such a rich set of views and experiences today on what has worked in terms of forest restoration and how restoration can support a green recovery and the well-being of us all. On behalf of the Forestry Division of FAO and all of those who've listened and attended this event, I would like to sincerely thank all the speakers. What a privilege it has been to listen to you. The UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration has only just begun, and yet we have heard about a few of the very many efforts to restore forests that already exist across the globe. From the Great Green Wall Initiative, which aims to restore millions of hectares in the Sahel, to the 10 billion trees tsunami program in Pakistan, and a series of new initiatives in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. As Her Royal Highness Princess Basma emphasized, restoration is the key to building resilience, achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, and to leaving no one behind. She also reminded us that we are the last generation that can turn the tide on climate change, desertification, water scarcity, and biodiversity loss. So it's our duty to future generations to plant trees and forests. We heard from Costa Rica and others how important it is to engage and empower local communities in forest conservation and restoration, and to pay for the environmental services that forests provide. And we were reminded how protecting and restoring forests must be part of a holistic approach to ensure a sound global recovery. In FAO side, we are keen to continue our work on restoration and our commitment to the Great Green Wall. We will continue to provide support through our various programs that are currently supporting more than 40 countries around the world to restore degraded forest landscapes. More broadly, within the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration, we will be helping countries and other actors to mobilize resources and action to restore all types of ecosystems. And if you haven't already signed up to be part of the Generation Restoration, then please do so now. Next year, the Republic of Korea will host the 15th World Forestry Congress with the theme of building a green, healthy, and resilient future with forests. So this will be an excellent opportunity to further share these experiences on how to best scale up forest ecosystem restoration. As we've heard from the Director General of FAO, investments in forest restoration will contribute to economic recovery from the pandemic by creating green jobs, generating new livelihoods, and increasing food security. It will also help us mitigate and adapt to climate change, increase habitats for biodiversity, and provide numerous wood and non-wood forest products that we all use in our daily lives. And it will increase the availability of green spaces for recreation. So in short, healthy forests mean healthy people. So let us protect, manage, and restore our forests to make sure that we are on the right path to recovery and well-being. So let me again express our sincere thanks and appreciation to our esteemed speakers, and to all of you who have joined us. I wish you a fantastic International Day of Forests on behalf of the Forestry Division of FAO. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those closing comments there. And just to wrap up, I think we've had some very clear messages coming out this morning. We've just heard healthy forests mean healthy people, and the opposite is also true. When our forests are not healthy, we, the people of the earth, cannot be healthy either. And at the moment, we are degrading our forests and other land around the world, and that's a very serious issue. By degrading our forests, we are destroying the life support systems of our planet. But the final message that I think we should all take home from this morning is one of hope, because we can turn this around. We've heard from people all over the world this morning talking about the efforts they are putting in to give us healthy forests and healthy people, to restore our forests, our degraded lands, to put right the damage that we have done. And it's very important to realize also that forest restoration is not just planting trees for the production of timber, things like that, but it creates prosperity in many ways through helping to create watersheds, helping to preserve water, helping to preserve biodiversity, providing livelihoods for local people, and, as I said, supporting our life support systems on this planet, which I'm sure we can agree is a very important issue. So that's why we need to be restoring our forests. Thank you. That's what I took from today. I'm sure you'll all have taken home your own messages. I would just like to say thank you to all of our excellent and very distinguished panelists, some of whom were able to join us in person, which was marvelous. Some of whom joined us by video, which was very useful too. It was great to hear from such a wide range of such distinguished people. If we were meeting in person, I'd invite a round of applause. That's not possible, but please receive our thanks. And I'll hand over now, finally, back to Tina Verhanen to announce the next steps for the celebration of today's International Day of Forests. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Fiona, for your excellent moderation. I would like to close this high-level segment of the celebrations by thanking again all our honorable speakers, Director General, and also thanks to our interpreters. So, Your Royal Highness, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. We are now ready to start the special technical session to continue our celebration of the International Day of Forests. I would like to invite FAO's Chief Scientist, Dr. Ismahane Elouafi, to kick off the session. Dr. Elouafi, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Tina. And I would like to do my speech in Arabic, and then we're going to switch to English. So with your, let me go. So, أصحاب السعادة صاحبة السمو الملكي الأميرة بسمة بنت علي، المدير العام للفاو للمنظمة، السادة الضيوف الأكارم، أيتها السيدات، أيها السادة. ما سمعناه اليوم من المناقشات والعروض لا يترك أمامنا مجالا للشك حيال التحديات الهائلة التي تجابه غاباتنا خلال فترتنا الراهنة. وهذه التحديات الجمة تتراوح من تهديدات مرتبطة بالتغير المناخي، ويصل تأثيرها إلى ما يزيد على 200 مليون شخص ممن يواجهون تهديد الشح المائي والجفاف وتدهور البيئة الطبيعية، إلى تهديدات تعزى إلى النمو السكاني السريع والذي بدوره يزيد من الطلب على الغذاء، متسبباً بضغط على الأراضي والغابات التي تحيط بها مخاطر الاستثمار الجائر والإزالة لصالح الزراعة. دعونا لا نغفل التحديات المهددة للحياة، هذه التحديات التي تؤثر في كل فرد منا خلال خوضنا غمار الرحلة مع هذه الجائحة التي تفشت في أرجاء العالم. وفي الوقت نفسه يتعين على الكثيرين مواصلة الكفاح في ظل موجات الجفاف المتكررة بوتيرة متزايدة والفيضانات وانتشار أسراب الجراد، ناهيك عن النزاعات التي تشهدها المناطق الجافة. لعل القيمة الهائلة للموارد الغابات العالمية لا تخفى على أحد، فقرابة ثلثها نجده في مناطق نعيش فيه وفيه ندرة بالمياه تزداد يوماً تلو الآخر، وهي أيضاً موطن وبيت لنحو 3 مليار شخص. اسمحوا لي بذكر بعضها. نصف كمية الأغذية المنتجة حول العالم تنتج بالأراضي الجافة، وأيضاً في هذه الأراضي الجافة تسهم الغابات بدور رئيسي من خلال توفيرها لطيف واسع من الموارد، بدءاً من الوقود ومواد البناء والانتهاء بالفاكهة والمكسرات والأدوية والألياف. فجميع هذه السلع تمثل مصدراً للدخل بالنسبة إلى مئات الملايين من الأشخاص داخل المجتمعات المعتمدة على الغابات، ناهيك عن كونها شبكة أمان إبان فترات القحط وغيرها من الظروف الصعبة. أضف إلى ذلك أن التربة والغابات السليمة في الأراضي الجافة هي بمثابة مستودع لا يستهان به للكربون، أما إدارتها المستدامة فتوفر إمكانية هائلة للحفاظ على قدرة تلك الغابات على حجز الكربون، ما يخفف بالتالي من التأثيرات الخطيرة المرتبطة بالتغير المناخي الذي نشهده في الوقت الراهن. لحماية هذا الكنز نحن في أمس الحاجة إلى العمل التحويلي التشاركي collective action that Your Highness mentioned in the chat. اسمحوا لي أن أفسر أكثر في هذا اليوم الدولي للغابات. شهدت العقود الثلاثة الأخيرة تحولات طال انتظارها من خلال التركيز المتزايد على رأس المال البشري والاجتماعي، فضلاً عن الاستجابة إلى كل سياق على حدة من سياقات الأراضي الجافة، وذلك على التوازي مع الأخذ بعين الاعتبار كلاً من الأطراف الفاعلة والمؤسسات والمعرفة والاحتياجات على المستوى المحلي. إن القيام بتدخلات ترمي إلى زيادة الإنتاج الزراعي دون التسبب في تدهور الأراضي على المدى الطويل أو إيجاد فرص أمام تحقيق تنمية اقتصادية ذات قدرة على التأقلم مع المناخ غير ممكن بمعزل عن إحداث تغييرات جذرية على المستوى الشمولي والتشاركي. وهذا يعني المشاركة في إحداث التغيير مع المزارعين المحليين والقطاع الخاص ومراكز البحوث والمؤسسات الوطنية في ساحة مجتمعية مرتبطة معاً بالمساءلة والإنصاف والشفافية وسيادة القانون. وهذا يعني أيضاً أنه سيلزمنا حشد موارد مالية هائلة، لأن نهج العمل كالمعتاد business as usual لم يعد خياراً إن أردنا مستقبلاً مفعماً بالأمن الغذائي للجميع. في ضوء عقد الأمم المتحدة لاستعادة النظام الإيكولوجي لفترة 2021-2030 المزعم إطلاقه في يونيو القادم تبقى الحاجة إلى استراتيجيات اقتصادية واستثمارية مماثلة مطلوبة من المستويات فوق الوطنية إلى المستويات المحلية لوضع آليات تمويل مخصصة لاستعادة الغابات والبيئات الطبيعية. أيضاً شدد القادة الدوليون من خلال تحدي بون على أهمية استعادة البيئات الطبيعية للغابات، وذلك بالتعهد باستعادة الغابات على امتداد 350 مليون هكتار من الأراضي عن طريق تطبيق نهج البيئة الطبيعية المتكاملة. أما نطاق هذا النهج ومستوى الطلب عليه لتحسين مصادر المعيشة فيبقى نطاقاً كبيراً شأنه في ذلك شأن المتطلبات المالية. فهناك حاجة إلى تخصيص مبلغ يصل إلى 49 مليار دولار سنوياً من مصادر عامة وخاصة على حد السواء، مع دعوة إلى التعاون بين الأطراف وتقاسم التكاليف المرتبطة بإعداد نماذج جديدة من الترتيبات المالية. ولتوفير هذا النوع من الدعم المخصص لممارسي استعادة الغابات والمروجين للمشروع، تقوم آلية استعادة الغابات والبيئات الطبيعية منذ عام 2015 بتطوير أدوات ومنتجات مختلفة، منها على سبيل المثال منصات التعليم الإلكتروني ودالات الذكاء المالي، كما تضع المبادئ التوجيهية وتصدر مطبوعات مختلفة حول التمويل المستدام. لا شك أن تكلفة عدم اتخاذ أي إجراء حيال استعادة الأراضي تزيد ب3 أضعاف عن تكلفة الاستمرار في مبادرات الاستعادة داخل آسيا وأفريقيا، الأمر الذي يجعل من الاستعادة استثماراً سديداً، بما في ذلك الاستثمار في استعادة غابات الأراضي الجافة. وهذا خبر جيد جداً من صديقتي ماريا إلينا أن المشروع للأردن والكونغو إن شاء الله يكون مقبول من GCF. فختاماً أتمنى لحضراتكم مناقشات بناءة وملهمة خلال الجلسات التقنية اليوم، وشكراً جزيلاً لإصغائكم. I'm going to switch to English just to introduce the next speaker, if I may, Tina. So it's really my pleasure to welcome Mr. Hugo Fernandez, Secretary of State for the Environment, Ministry of Ecological Transition and Demographic Challenge, Spain, to provide his opening remark. I think we have the video from Mr. Hugo.
Muy buena jornada a todos en este Día Internacional de los Bosques. Nuestro planeta se enfrenta hoy a dos grandes retos cuyo alcance va mucho más allá de lo que durante muchos años se ha entendido como problemas ambientales. El cambio climático y la pérdida de biodiversidad, en la cual los científicos constatan lo que la naturaleza expresa cada vez con más claridad en forma de episodios meteorológicos inusuales y extremos, de sequías acentuadas, de subida del nivel del mar, de acelerada extinción de especies. Esta realidad es especialmente grave en las zonas áridas, donde el calentamiento del clima no solo es, a día de hoy, el doble de la media mundial, sino que las crisis agravadas van en aumento en estas regiones, como demuestran los impactos actuales de la pandemia de la COVID-19. Las sequías, las inundaciones, las enfermedades y plagas, los conflictos y otros factores ya están devastando los medios de vida en estas zonas. Y para hacer frente a estos problemas es urgente un cambio en la gestión de las tierras secas, de sus bosques y sus sistemas agrosilvopastorales asociados, con el fin de asegurar que sigan proporcionando bienes y servicios críticos a quienes las habitan, protegiendo y restaurando la biodiversidad, mejorando así la fertilidad y la estructura del suelo y aumentando el almacenamiento de carbono en los suelos y la biomasa. Para lograr esa transición ecológica y por tanto valores económicos y valores sociales, es necesario contar con los actores locales, sin distinción de género. Deben desempeñar un papel crucial en este proceso. En España conocemos muy bien la situación, porque 2/3 partes de nuestros terrenos forestales pueden ser considerados bosques secos y sistemas silvopastorales, donde se compatibilizan un uso ganadero con diferentes aprovechamientos forestales. Por eso, al igual que todos los gobiernos, estamos adoptando y aportando una visión común de la alimentación, la agricultura, la ganadería y la silvicultura sostenibles, avanzando de la mano de los esfuerzos mundiales, como el Decenio de las Naciones Unidas para la Restauración de los Ecosistemas, para prevenir, detener y revertir la degradación de los ecosistemas en todo el mundo. Los bosques son el mayor sumidero de carbono gestionable, lo que los convierte en una herramienta imprescindible para alcanzar los ambiciosos compromisos que España y Europa han adquirido en la lucha contra el cambio climático. Por ello, son esenciales para el cumplimiento del objetivo de neutralidad climática a mitad del siglo establecido en los Acuerdos de París. Así, fomentar las absorciones de las tierras forestales es la mejor solución, basada en la naturaleza, para compensar las emisiones imposibles de eliminar. Para cuantificar cuál es la contribución de todo tipo de bosques a la lucha contra el cambio climático, es fundamental contar con información fiable, de calidad y continua en el tiempo, como los inventarios forestales nacionales. Nuestro inventario, el inventario español en concreto, lleva ya más de 50 años recopilando datos. En España, las absorciones asociadas al sector uso del suelo, cambios de uso de suelo y silvicultura suponen el 11,4% de las emisiones brutas producidas, de las cuales el 87% corresponde a tierras forestales. Si sumamos las absorciones debidas a los productos de la madera, la cifra alcanza el 94% de las absorciones netas. Las absorciones forestales se deben fundamentalmente a las actividades de forestación y gestión de los bosques y se estiman teniendo en cuenta el crecimiento en biomasa aérea y subterránea, materia orgánica muerta y a carbono orgánico en suelos. Las absorciones debidas a la gestión forestal sostenible suponen más del 85% de las absorciones estimadas para las actividades forestales. Por ello, España apuesta decididamente por esa gestión, una gestión planificada de los bosques que no solo son sumideros de carbono, sino que son claves para garantizar la calidad del agua y la regulación natural de su ciclo, contribuyendo a la salvaguarda de los ecosistemas fluviales y evitando costosas inversiones en obras e infraestructuras para garantizar el nivel de abastecimiento de agua. Los bosques son, además, reservas de biodiversidad, fuentes de salud y motores del desarrollo rural. De hecho, la España rural, al igual que en muchos otros países, se vertebra, entre otros elementos, sobre un tejido forestal, bosques y sistemas agrosilvopastorales, que aportan actividad económica y empleo, valor añadido y cultura. Por tanto, apostar por el territorio forestal es hacerlo por un tejido social valioso, por la garantía de su conservación y la posibilidad de seguir aportando a las generaciones venideras sus valores asociados, incluyendo ganadería, agricultura y patrimonio cultural milenario. En suma, los bosques, y más aún los bosques secos, son nuestros aliados para alcanzar los objetivos de desarrollo sostenible y, por tanto, resulta imperativo actuar ante la amenaza y las consecuencias del cambio climático, especialmente en zonas mediterráneas, en las que el gradual aumento de la temperatura, los cambios en el régimen de precipitaciones y la expansión de especies alóctonas están comprometiendo la salud e incluso la pervivencia de las masas forestales. Es, por tanto, más que necesario fomentar la adaptación de nuestros bosques al cambio climático, así como la lucha contra las cada vez más numerosas plagas y enfermedades emergentes que suponen un peligro cada vez mayor. En este sentido, al igual que en la amenaza que está suponiendo la pandemia de la COVID-19 para la humanidad, la inversión en investigación es clave. Será crucial el papel de la gestión forestal adaptativa, apoyándose en los elevados niveles de variabilidad genética que tienen la mayoría de nuestras formaciones forestales. Debemos poner el foco también en aquellos ecosistemas que ya han sido degradados hasta la desertificación. Debemos revertir estos procesos de degradación y recuperar el terreno perdido. Necesitamos mejorar los sistemas de aprovechamiento sostenible de los productos agrícolas, ganaderos y forestales, seleccionando ejemplares adaptados a las condiciones ambientales, así como los requerimientos cambiantes del mercado para mantener la rentabilidad económica de los sistemas agrosilvopastorales. En conclusión, hace falta una transformación, y aunque podría pensarse que para lograrlo hay que partir de cero y volver a empezar, lo cierto es que en todas las regiones hay un importante legado de lecciones aprendidas, de tradiciones y prácticas valiosas que deben ser apreciadas y continuadas. Todo este aprendizaje adquirido en el marco de un desafío que es global y común debe servir para apuntalar esa transformación a través de la cooperación y las alianzas entre las comunidades, las administraciones, el sector privado, las ONGs, el mundo científico, es decir, todos conscientes tanto de las oportunidades que la acompañan como de los riesgos que se derivan de la inacción. Y porque cada paisaje de las tierras áridas es diferente y, por tanto, no hay soluciones únicas para todos, cuando se planifican nuevas intervenciones o se dirigen las existentes en consonancia con el enfoque, es fundamental que haya transparencia y participación para acordar los incentivos, los desincentivos y el debate sobre los riesgos asociados. Concluyo ya, no sin antes agradecer a todo el equipo humano de la FAO y de cada uno de los estados involucrados en el grupo de trabajo de bosques secos y sistemas agrosilvopastorales el trabajo realizado y la colaboración de su informe final con el sugerente título de Creación de bosques y sistemas agrosilvopastorales resilientes en las tierras áridas, un enfoque para lograr transformaciones económicas, sociales y económicamente sostenibles. Sin duda, va a ser una magnífica herramienta para la recuperación de unos ecosistemas tan ricos en biodiversidad y cultura como son los bosques en zonas áridas. Cedo ahora la palabra a la señora Fiona Harvey, que presentará el enfoque transformador basado en los amplios conocimientos y lecciones aprendidas en este grupo de trabajo. Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you, Mr. Hogo, for your valuable opening remark. We acknowledge the Spanish government's continuous support. Your Royal Highness, Excellencies, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining the first technical session on fostering the transition to plume the dryland forest and agro-silvopastoral systems. You may not expect it, but there is much more to protect in drylands that have 27% of the world's forest and woodlands, supplying about 60% of the world's food production and supporting more than half of the world's livestock. However, climate warming in dryland is currently twice the global warming. According to the IPCC Climate and Land Report, in drylands, climate and desertification are projected to cause the reduction in crop and livestock productivity, modify the plant species mix, and reduce biodiversity. And with 1.5 scenario, 178 million people in dryland areas are projected to be more vulnerable by 2050. Therefore, business as usual approach is no longer an option. And this is what inspired dryland experts to join their efforts and expertise to answer the key question: what needs to change to ensure the sustainable production of dryland forest and agro-silvopastoral systems in a changing climate? And because each dryland landscape is different, there are no one-size-fits-all solutions. Extensive consultation with members of FAO Committee on Forestry, Working Group on Dryland Forest and Agro-Silvopastoral System, and other national and sectorial experts began in 2019 to provide a simple approach for the context-dependent in dryland. The experts mapped the best practices and lessons learned with in-depth analysis on different action at policy, governance, and practice levels. The proposed approach focuses on the sustainability pillars. Under each of the three interconnected social, economic, and environmental sustainability pillars, there are three expected transformations. In total, we proposed 9 interconnected expected transformations. Given the current and future challenges under the economic pillar, the transition towards sustainable production system in dryland requires investment and an enabling policy for the management of different environmental and economic risk factors of different value chains and for the adoption of the most appropriate practices and technological innovation. At the same time, the private sector investment and public-private partnership are crucial to increase financial opportunity for sustainable production. However, without adequate and inclusive access to climate risk insurance systems, communities and producers will not be able to recover from climate disasters. Under the social pillar, the expected transformation focuses on human and social capital. The evidence found that where communities are part of the broader development discourse, positive impacts have been widely noted, with associated benefits on food and health. Therefore, equity, social protection, participation, and empowerment are the key transformational changes to reduce vulnerability to climate shocks. The critical pillar is the environmental pillar, as even if global warming can be limited to 1.5-degree increase, its impact will nevertheless test dryland ecosystems and aggravate land degradation. Therefore, an urgent need to balance land management interventions in dry land that ensure sustainable production, support local livelihood, and safeguard that natural resources, including water resources. The three critical environmental transformations are on the efficient use of dry land nature resources, strengthen the restoration efforts, and ecosystem conservation and protection. These expected transformation, when combined, can reinforce connection between the economic, social, and environmental pillars of sustainability and can take place through effective actions at various scales by different stakeholders. Potential benefits, trade-off, and co-benefits should be assessed, weighted up, and managed accordingly, while taking into account the traditional knowledge and gender equity. Nevertheless, the precipitation of benefits and trade-off may be different for different stakeholders. And this approach also goes hand in hand with FAO Common Vision for Sustainable Food and Agriculture and the 10 elements of agroecology that respond to the dryland context. It shows the complementarity and interlinkages to progress toward the SDG achievement. And because each dryland landscape is different, there are no one-size-fits-all solution. Key messages were recommended by the dryland expert to operationalize this approach. Interventions conducted in support of a specific expected transformation in one of the three sustainability pillars can directly or indirectly benefit the achievement of expected transformations in other pillars. And for the sake of the sustainability, single action can force synergies with other ongoing processes instead of creating the trade-off. And for example, sustainable forest and landscape management approaches can help stakeholders find these synergies to implement balanced solutions. In addition to the consideration of traditional local research-derived knowledge to make a greater contribution towards sustainability and reducing the risk of unintended trade-off. Also, the approach promotes cooperation and partnership between communities, governments, private sector, NGOs, academia, and other actors, incentivized by a shared vision of the expected transformation. So when planning new or steering existing interventions in alignment with this approach, there is need for transparency, participation, and indeed negotiation to agree on incentives and disincentives and discuss the associated risk. Last but not least, champions are needed to advocate and promote the transformational change in the management of dryland agro-silvopastoral system. This publication is also available in other languages, so stay tuned. We produced also a policy brief that will be launched as well soon. To build back better, where possible, local trees and their management can play a major role in supporting livelihood and agriculture. Their interconnected economic, social, and environmental value should not be underestimated in maintaining, creating, and restoring dryland landscape. Happy International Day of Forests. And now I welcome Ms. Natasha, Deputy Director for Africa and Middle East, U.S. Forest Service, to moderate the discussion with our honorable panelists on how to foster the transition to bloom the dryland landscape. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Fida, and thank you for that wonderful presentation. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening. My name is Natasha Marwa. I'm the Deputy Director for the Middle East and Africa with the U.S. Forest Service International Programs. It's a privilege to welcome you all to this important event, and I am humbled to be your moderator. Before we launch into the discussion, I wanted to remind the audience that you can use the Q&A function to send in your questions, and please also keep an eye on the chat. Colleagues will be sharing more information, materials, presenter bios, and details in the chat box. And finally, you can tweet about this event and many others on the International Day of Forests using the hashtag INTL Forest Day. Today is a celebration of the 2021 International Day of Forests, a wonderful occasion to gather and celebrate the world's forests and natural resources. It is also a fitting occasion to launch the FAO publication that we just heard about, Building Resilient Dryland Forests and Agro-Silvopastoral Systems, and for hearing perspectives shared by our esteemed panelists. Dryland forests are in urgent need of conservation, attention, and repair. And this publication offers bold ideas and recommendations for transforming food production systems that rely on these ecosystems. Healthy and productive drylands are the building blocks for resilient livelihoods, economies, environment, and health. Maintaining productivity of dryland food production systems will ensure healthy communities and a healthy world under a changing climate. Over the past year, COVID-19 has taught us so much, including the need to be flexible and ready, especially when it comes to complex crises such as climate change. Cutting-edge science, policy, governance, and practical interventions at all scales can contribute to building resilience and adapting to climate change. Supporting economic, social, and environmental sustainability in drylands is required in order to promote the type of transformational change we will continue to dive into during this session. And now, without further delay, I am thrilled to have three high-level panelists with me who graciously accepted the invitation to join us today to offer their perspectives on building resilient dryland forests and agro-silvopastoral systems. You will hear shortly from Professor Jean Pascal, former Vice Chair of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change and Professor of Climate and Environment from the University of Louvain. Ms. Lorena Aguilar, former Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs in Costa Rica and the Regional Director for International Cooperation and Research at Flaxo. And Mr. Yi Anping, Director of South-South and Triangular Cooperation for FAO. We will have about 20 minutes or so for this discussion, so please join me in warmly welcoming our panelists. So we'll start with Professor Jean Pascal, who I think has some slides to share.
I hope you see them. Do you see
them? Yes, we can see
well?
them. Thank you so much. So we'll start off with you, Professor, and just the first question, why is transformation so critical in dryland ecosystems?
Well, Natasha, I will try to answer your question relying on two recent reports, the IPCC special reports related to land issues in the context of climate change on the one hand, and later I will also say a few words about some insights coming from the Global Sustainable Development Report 2019, which also made a few recommendations in the context of what we are celebrating today. The IPCC reports I just mentioned the full title is actually very long. It's a special report on climate change, desertification, land degradation, sustainable land management, food security, and greenhouse gas fluxes in terrestrial systems. And you can imagine it touches many issues that are very close to the subject of the day. So I will not, of course, provide a full presentation of this report here, but just highlighting in answering your question some key elements. The first key message is that the risk and this has been evoked by by Minister Fernandez a minute ago, the risk from climate change increases with every fraction of a degree. And just looking at those three columns where you see the increasing risk, level of risk with the increasing temperature above the pre-industrial level, and those three columns are very much related to the subject of the day in terms of dry land, water scarcity, soil erosion, vegetation loss. And you see that as we go above 1.5 degrees C, above the pre-industrial, we are already hitting, particularly for water scarcity in dry lands, some limits, some transition to a high level of risk. Another key message from that report is that the level of risk posed by climate change doesn't only depend on the global warming. Of course, it depends, as I've just shown, on the level of global warming, but it also depends on how we develop in the future, how population, consumption, production patterns, technological development, and land management patterns evolve. You see here for desertification, land degradation, food insecurity, for the same temperature increase, you see for two different scenarios, they are called in the jargon the shared socioeconomic pathway. You see that the level of risk and the manner in which the risk evolve is very different, and it's much lower overall for this scenario SSP1 than for SSP3. SSP1 is the one focused on sustainability. So it really shows that the future, including in drylands, is in our hands, because we can choose to go towards an SSP1 focus or stay on the opposite trend, which is called SSP3. There are many good news in this report, actually. One of them, for example, is that there are many co-benefits. I mean, this has been evoked as well in the talk by Madame Haddad a minute ago. If we integrate the action around climate change adaptation and mitigation with measures to fight desertification, manage better land and forest and food security, we can bring many co-benefits in many areas. Just one example given and explored at length in the special report from the IPCC is that dietary choices matter. You have the long version here. We're not going to read this, but you'll have those slides at your disposal after all, after the talk. But choosing a more plant-based diet can have good consequences in terms of impact on land. Another key message from the IPCC special report is that involving local stakeholders in every decision-making and governance is really important to maximize the impact of the measures that are taken. So I will stop here because the next two slides actually answer of your next question, Natasha.
Thank you so much, and thank you for sharing good news with us as well. So thank you for that overview and important perspective. This next question is for Vice Minister Aguilar. As former Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs of Costa Rica, I'm keen to hear your perspective on land tenure and land ownership in dryland systems. How can governments and other decision-making bodies provide more land rights to local and indigenous communities and women?
Thank you, Natasha, and thank you, everyone. Greetings from Costa Rica, special to Her Royal Highness, Princess Basma, and congratulations to FIDA's team for the excellent report. Natasha, I mean, land tenure rights underpin land use change decisions and natural resource management authority. And we know insecure tenure rights are a contributor to deforestation and land degradation. And definitely clear and secure tenure rights can provide a basis for benefit sharing and negotiation with rights stakeholder governments and the private sector. However, in many countries, women tenure rights to land are either not recognized by law or custom, and if they are, they're usually secondary to men's rights. Women's rights to land are nuanced and highly context dependent, but recent analysis demonstrate a gap between international obligations and national law related to women's rights to land. Data, for example, from the OECD Development Center Social Institution and Gender Index, known as CIGI, found that women only have the same legal rights as men to own and access land in 28 countries in the world. So what can we do? I mean, for example, in Costa Rica, we're launching an award for productive units to disattach payment of environmental services to land, for example, because they cannot benefit because of that. And I have also been working with countries like Cameroon and Mexico to find solutions. In Cameroon, for example, a RED project was able to work with the chiefs, especially with the mothers and the wives of the chiefs, to convince them that women should have the right to own land.
Thank you so much, Ms. Lorena, and thank you for that last example. It seems really encouraging and inspiring and innovative in its approach as well. So thank you for that. My next question is for Director Anping. Can you share an example of the nexus between traditional knowledge, technology innovation, and the scientific community, where different pools of knowledge came together to support the sustainability of dryland forests or agro-silvopastoral systems?
谢谢主持人，我借这个机会，我先用中文表一个态，在此之后，我用英文来回答问题。首先，我对约旦公主殿下之一建议，他亲自来参加的活动。我非常高兴，也非常荣幸有机会参加今年的国际森林日的这个活动，纪念活动。刚才在高级别的会议上，我们获得了一些非常重要的信息，比如说，只有森林健康才能保证人的健康。每年全球森林减少的面积超过1000万多公顷。同时，森林用地的面积和粮食农业用地的面积的这个矛盾，现在越来越惊人。如何在保证粮食安全的前提下，来尽可能的减少森林的面积的减少，这是一个越来越复杂的问题。同时，许多代表也提到，恢复森林不仅仅是种树，是一个综合的体系，是一个综合的生态体系。恢复森林是需要大量的投资的，这个总干事反复提到。在本届会议开始的时候，我们的首席科学家也强调，每年需要490亿美元来支持森林的恢复，这是一个很大的数字。如何让更多的政府、私营部门、国际机构和其他的部门，包括学术来参与，这是一个非常重要的问题。所以说。还有一个重要信息呢，就是说我们需要全世界共同行动起来，联合起来才能够做到。所以说我作为来自联合国粮农组织南南与三方合作的我想提就是说，我们鼓励并希望可以通过南南合作和三方合作，为森林的恢复、为改善生态环境来做出更大的贡献。谢谢。下面我用英文来回答刚才主持人提出来的问题。Thank you very much for Madam Chair. Just raise this critical and important issue question. I would like to take this opportunity to share an example from China, which is from Haohan County dryland farming system. That has been declared we call the Global Important Agriculture Heritage System by FAO. This country is located on the border of Hurricane Sandland, which is one of the most deserted area in China. As everyone knows that soil erosion now is getting very serious. But in this country, soil erosion also is a huge challenge. You know that in 1987, soil erosion in this country was about 94% of its total area. And among them, over 60% was above moderate level or serious level. Hong Kong County has long dry farming system history, about 8,000 years. This ancestor has been accumulated a lot of skill and experience over 1,000 years of practice and learning. Over the past 2 decades, this country has successfully applied this new technology to control soil erosion and degradation. The farming and the production system is very much in symbiosis with their ecosystem. The main species in this country, such as the sea buckthorn, yellow willow, Chinese pine, mulberry, and sand pine, they tolerate drought, sand, wind erosion, and provide ecological protection. Agricultural crops grows in this area also has very long, strong drought and heating resilience. For example, the millet can tolerate about 48 hours without opening up at a temperature 40 degrees centigrade, while barley can only tolerate 20 hours, but wheat only can only about 15 hours. These efforts have significantly improved environment and production condition in this country. This country is also considered a moderator for dynamic conservation and adaptive management of dryland ecosystem. In fact, it was declared just site Hong Kong was named Global Top 500 on ecological development by UN in the year of 2002. What made this system successful was that it brought together all elements in the ecosystem, including traditional knowledge, wisdom of local people, landscape, right policy, and technical support. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Yi. Thank you for providing that example of the nexus and coming together of those different pools of knowledge in this example of controlling erosion. Now I'll shift gears back to Mr. Jean-Pascal, and I'm wondering, how can we increase awareness about dryland ecosystems and their unique benefits that may lead to greater advocacy and conservation measures? There's often a misnomer that drylands are equated with barren land or lands that are not productive or useful. How do we change that perception and increase awareness?
Well, I think so. Thank you for the question. I think some of the elements to that question can be found in the IPCC report in terms, for example, of economic valuation, in terms of events like the one we have today, in terms of education, but then a whole other range of elements can be found in this Global Sustainable Development Report published in 2019 at the request of the UN General Assembly, and it's focused on the on all the obstacles on the way of implementing Agenda 2030, which is a very broad agenda, of course, but I will try to give some highlights of that report, which could contribute to answering your question. The GSDR 2019 identified 6 key entry points, which I will show in a second, for successful transformation. And transformation is really at the core of that report. That's why I thought it would be useful to use it today, which is focused on transformation in the dryland ecosystems, and 4 levers. So 6 key entry points and 4 levers that are critical to maximize impact in different parts of the world. And the report insists on the fact that true transformation is possible only when the levers are deployed together in an integrated and international manner. You could say holistically, to use a word that is used very much these days, and that was used earlier today. So here are the 6 entry points: human well-beings and capabilities, sustainable economies, energy decarbonization and access, food and nutrition, urban and peri-urban development, and global commons. So certainly, forests, drylands are linked to food and nutrition and to the global commons. At least those 2 entry points are very much related to the forest. And then the 4 levers are governance, economy and finance, behavior and collective action, science and technology. And if you read that report, and it's available on this website here, you'll have an idea of on how to maximize awareness about the tools that are available to solve the problems we have to solve and to implement the Agenda 2030. The slides I've just been showing will be available in a few minutes from now on the webpage that's here. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Jean-Pascal. And that previous slide is such a nice and clear way to lay out those different levers and the different inputs. So thank you so much for that and for sharing this material. Ms. Larina, over to you. As we heard from Mr. Jean-Pascal earlier, research shows that most dryland systems will become hotter and drier under climate change scenarios. Vulnerable groups, especially women, will continue to be disproportionately impacted by climate trajectories. How can partners working in countries that have significant dryland ecosystem resources meaningfully involve women and other marginalized groups in decision making?
Thank you, Natasha, for that question. And probably you're going to hear already some of our biodiversity. There's some parakeets around, so sorry for the background sound. Well, first of all, it is more than just involvement in decision making. There are a series of criteria that I like to call them like 8 golden rules to ensure that really women and marginalized people are taken into account. First of all, the people that are on the ground, the project teams, need to be inclusive and with a variety of representations, and they need to have the technical expertise to support gender responsive actions. And what do we mean by gender responsive actions? It's not only understanding that we're different, but really having an impact in closing those gaps that are important. We need to also understand the inclusion of the national gender policy and the international mandates that the countries have taken. We need, of course, that women and women organizations are represented in these stakeholder consultations. The 4th point, probably one of the most important, is to conduct a gender analysis, understand who uses what, when, what are the different knowledge, what are the different constraints that they have to fully engage and to fully benefit of the initiatives. And then we need to promote equal rights to access and derive benefits from the use, management, and conservation of dryland systems. Definitely, the one that you were asking is to support the full, equal, and effective engagement of women and men. This is not about counting warm bodies in a meeting. It's to really create the processes so that people can fully engage. And that has to do a lot with knowledge. If you don't explain, for example, what is IPCC, what is RED, what is landscape restoration, then people cannot fully engage. I mean, red is not a color. It's more than that. There is a need to that. Very important, we need to provide the adequate resources. We have all the financial mechanisms right now related to climate change with gender policy and gender plan of actions, but we need to ensure direct access to marginalized groups, especially for those resources. And then we need to ensure the result frameworks are gender responsive. We need to be able to measure. This is what Fida was saying, that we need to build back better, but how? How can we measure what that better means and for whom that better is? Thank you, Natasha.
Thank you, Ms. Lorena. And if I may just ask you a brief follow-up question, if you could offer one piece of advice to decision makers to adopt the 8 golden rules, what advice would you offer?
My advice is that they will be surprised how effective and efficient their initiatives are when everybody is involved in these processes. Leaving 3.365 billion solutions, where half of the world, women, is illogical when we're facing so many challenges in this world.
Thank you so much. And our last question for the afternoon is back to Mr. Yi. There's tremendous potential for stakeholders at all levels to exchange knowledge and practices about sustainable dryland ecosystem management. How can there be more open and transparent sharing of failures between policymakers, national government, the scientific community, practitioners, development partners, to help foster and facilitate lessons learned?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think that this is a very good question, and also it's a very complex question. Let me try to my best to answer this question. When we talk about knowledge sharing and learning, we always we like to see a success story, good story. Even when we to talk about the lesson learned, there is discomfort for talking about the failure story. If we want to have a productive conversation of knowledge sharing and adaptive learning, we need to normalize the so-called failure story. The failure story and lessons learned to provide adaptive learning cases story that can bring stakeholders, including policymakers, farmers, scientific communities, and development partners, sit around the same table. We sit together. By doing so, it creates a platform for them to co-create solutions and innovations to address the weakness and failures. The failure story needed to address integrated improvement, innovation, and should not to be about point fingers. This is the best way to create the trust among all of the partners. Make this dialogue open, more transparent, more inclusive, and more productive. Coming back to your question, how this applies to exchange of knowledge about the dryland ecosystem management? First term of dryland could evoke an arid wasteland. This is far from the truth. Let me share a few insights from the first global assessment of the trees, forestry, and land use in dryland published by FAO in the year of 2019. First, world dryland contains 1.2 billion hectares of forest. This is 27% of world forestry area. Second, an estimated 2 billion people live in the dryland. Among them, 90% are in the developing countries or developing regions. Third, drylands are the home to 35% of the global biodiversity hotspots. Fourth, dryland supports half of the world livestock, a key source of the food security for 90% of the dryland population living in the developing country and developing area. Last, dryland is an integral part of food system and provide rich ecosystem service. So local people have a profound understanding of their dryland ecosystem. They interact daily with their environment and frequently use a wide range of adaptation messages as part of their livelihood. The local community are held and the guidance of the knowledge of drylands. One of the most quoted reasons for failure of the land and forestry management initiative is a mismatch between the goals of the local resource owner and the user and those of project initiated and implemented. This is the first gap we need to bridge: information and knowledge on the land and forestry management practice to understand what needs to be left untouched, what to be improved, and what to be changed. This is exactly what FAO South-South and Triangular Cooperation Division and the Forestry Division aim to do with making every voice count for adaptive management initiative. This initiative will cover countries in the region of Asia and Africa. By working with existing platform and network in the countries and the communities to promote a learning by doing approach with participatory community video. The use of participatory video is not new, but its use as a tool for regular monitoring project progress and change in practice, behavior, success, failure is relatively new. This video will provide a visual baseline of current land and forestry management practice in the different landscape and countries. The aim is to use this video case study to bring together the communities, policymakers, scientific communities, and development partners to work together on identify solutions that will add value to the communities and the ecosystems. In this process, communities and countries will learn from each other through video-based knowledge sharing. Language barrier will be easily, quickly, and cost-effectively solved through the translation without losing visual content. Beyond knowledge sharing, both divisions, we hope to use this video to advocate for change in policy, change in practice, and change in behavior. The use of
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Yi, for that. Yes. Yes, please go ahead.
The use of video as a monitoring, knowledge management, and South-South cooperation tool will revolutionize the way of measure and the community impact and change. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Yi. And I very much appreciated what you said about normalizing failures, sharing, and using that as a way to build trust. So with this wraps up and concludes our Q&A discussion with the panelists. Please join me in warmly thanking all of our panelists for their insightful comments, advice, and recommendations. And just to close out, as we heard earlier from our distinguished panelists and guests, there's tremendous opportunity for international cooperation to support conservation of dryland ecosystems. We have an obligation to support sustainable conservation of these areas. There are many opportunities for the international community to support local and national efforts. From the perspective of the US Forest Service and our partners in the Middle East and Africa, we have seen tremendous potential in fostering partnerships across the region. We have also seen the power of regional networks of expertise in conserving drylands and restoring ecosystems. Ecosystems transcend borders and traditional boundaries. Working collaboratively across countries and across regions is critical for addressing climate change. We continue to see successes when international organizations convene diverse partners and perspectives from around the region. I'm excited about the initiative Mr. Yi mentioned towards the end of the panel discussion, making every voice count for adaptive management, working with these existing platforms and networks in countries and communities across continents to convene policymakers, scientists, development partners, and communities to learn from each other through innovative platforms. I emphasize all of this as an opportunity for international cooperation to continue to support sharing local knowledge and experiences, to build on local and regional expertise, and to promote communities of learning and collaboration to advance innovation. From our perspective, this collaborative work has led to extraordinary achievements and professional development. And these partnerships did not take place overnight. They required long-term collaboration, engagement, and investment. Thank you all again very much for your participation today. Happy International Day of Forests, and I will turn it over to the next session on sustainable financing for forest and landscape restoration and a short teaser video. Thank you again.
Well, that was an amazing session. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of FAO and all the collaborators in this technical session, I welcome you to this special event on sustainable financing for achieving forest and landscape restoration in celebration of the International Day of Forests. We apologize for delay in beginning this session. That was from the previous program. We will be continuing this session promptly just until 2:00 p.m. this afternoon when the interpreters go home. My name is Sarah Shear. I'm the president and CEO of Eco Agriculture Partners, an NGO that promotes sustainable landscapes worldwide. We have enjoyed a long and rich collaboration with FAO, including in its programs on forest and landscape restoration and on landscape finance, and collaborated in this work presented today. As you are all certainly aware, despite the strong technical knowledge base and powerful rationale for restoration, the pace and scale of action have been inadequate. Lack of financing for the many diverse investments needed across degraded landscapes to restore productivity and ecosystem-wide health has been a key barrier. During this session, we announced the release of an exciting new publication called Local Financing Mechanisms for Forest and Landscape Restoration that reviews a wide range of local level investment mechanisms that have been successfully used in practice. The publication is available in English and French in the link that's being shared in the chat. Several specific examples will be highlighted today. You can see in the agenda that we have a panel of 4 distinguished speakers. And in addition to their contributions, we encourage participants to make comments and ask questions in the chat. FAO has established a community of practice in forest landscape restoration, and following this event, questions raised in the chat will be addressed in the community. You're also welcome to sign up for that, and you can find the link in the chat. We'll be soliciting your inputs also briefly through an electronic poll after the speaker presentation and follow-up questions from me. So let's get started. First, let me welcome the distinguished Christophe Bessassier, a forestry officer of FAO and my longtime collaborator, who will introduce the forest and landscape restoration mechanism of FAO. You can find the full bio for Christophe in the chat. Christophe, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, everyone. Before giving the floor to my colleague Mathilde Evans for the presentation of our new publication, I will just give you a few information on the scope of the challenge, the main available funding sources relevant for FLR, and key work packages developed by our FLRM mechanism to support country partners' resource mobilization efforts. Next, please. Yeah. Globally, no. Previous one, please. Yeah. Globally, up to 2 billion hectares are degraded, and several global targets have been set up, as said already. Bonn Challenge, New York Declaration on Forest, degradation neutralities. To achieve these global targets, it will require up to $49 billion a year for the Bonn Challenge and the New York Declaration, and more than $300 billion a year for achieving the degradation neutrality targets. Next, please. Multiple funding sources are available to achieve these global targets. State budgets, domestic resources, climate finance, such as Green Climate Fund or Adaptation Fund, environmental funds, such as the Global Environmental Facility, multilateral, bilateral donors, non-governmental funding, private sector, and non-traditional funding, such as the crowdfunding platform. All those potential investors, no, sorry, please keep this first slide. All those potential investors have not the same appetite for risk, as you can see on the scheme, depending on the level of degradation and the cost of restoration in a particular landscape. What is key to ensure long sustainable financing for forest landscape restoration is to mobilize simultaneously these multiple funding sources. Next, please. To support our country partners' resource mobilization effort, our FLRM team developed several work packages. We are supporting, we are providing technical assistance to support country partners to access multiple financing instruments, such as Green Climate Fund, Global Environmental Facility, Adaptation Fund. We are also proposing capacity building products on sustainable financing for forest landscape restoration, e-learning courses, community of practice with series of webinars, regional training on preparation of bankable projects, etc. We are supporting country partners to develop financial plans to facilitate the implementation of their national program. It means that we are providing support on value chains development to increase sustainability of FLR investment, on market-based mechanisms such as payment for ecosystem services to provide incentives. And sometimes also, as in Lebanon, we are supporting the operationalizations of the national forest funds. And finally, we are regularly publishing working papers, guidelines on sustainable FLR finance, such as the one to be presented to you now and entitled Local Financing Mechanism for Forest and Landscape Restoration, a review of local level investment mechanism. Thank you for your attention, and over to you, Sarah.
Thank you so much, Christophe, for that excellent introduction. Let me now invite Mathilde Evans, expert in financing on forest landscape restoration of FAO, to provide us with an overview of the main findings of this great publication on local financing mechanisms. You can find Mathilde's bio with more details in the chat. Go ahead, Mathilde.
Thank you very much, Sarah. So I will present to you what's in the publication that is out today about local financing mechanism. What we wanted to look at is how can we actually bring the money down to the ground for forest and landscape restoration. Next. So in a landscape, you have a mosaic of different land uses. Next. In the landscape, you have a mosaic of different land uses, and each land use is linked to a type of financing needs. You will not finance the same way a land that is used for agriculture, one that is used for livestock, one that is used for forest. So you need to have actually different type of financing for each type of land. And one type of land has evolved during its life. For example, if you want to restore land, next, you will have to think about all the different type of activity that you will have to do during the entire restoration process. So from protection, for example, you will have to do some zoning, you might have to do some training as well. Then during the restoration process, it will be about maybe bringing some seeds, bringing some material for the restoration. You also might want to bring some improved seeds, improved breeds to improve the way agriculture is done. You might also want to have less people in the area that you are looking to restore. So maybe trying to develop some activities, socioeconomic alternative activities so that the people are out of these areas. And for that, you will have to do some business development, trainings, etc. Next. So you do have a lot of activities in the restoration process, and they have different financing needs. For the purpose of this publication, we tried to classify the different type of investment needs for restoration. And we basically found out that you have two different main type of investment needed. The one that are called the enabling investment. These investments are really important to lay the institutional and policy foundation for your work. It's about creating coordination between stakeholders, appropriate legal and policy framework, etc. So all what's needed for restoration to be successful. So that's one very important part. And the other part that is really important are the direct investments. Actually, how are you gonna do restoration? And for this, you will need to do restoration, improve agricultural practices, etc. And for this, you will need some investment as well, which are called the asset investment. So how are we gonna finance all these investment that are needed? Next. For this, you have different type of financing mechanism. For the purpose of the study as well, we separated them into, we had to classify the financing mechanism. And so we classify them in two types. You have the financial mechanisms, and this one provide funds for FLR activities at different stages of the FLR process. It's to cover the transaction cost. And you know them very well. You have the one that are for profits, such as the loans, for example, the equity investment, or the non-for-profit ones, which are the grants or the public finance instruments. So that's one way, one type of financing mechanism. The other type are the market mechanism. They are mechanisms that are actually using market incentive for investment. And these, for example, you have payment for ecosystem services, ecotourism, etc. So there is a market mechanism involved in the financing. So in the publication, we looked at every and each of these mechanisms. We studied them and we gave a case study applied to forest and landscape restoration. I will show you only one to explain how we study them, and then I will invite you to look at the other in the publication. Next. The one I chose to present today is the one that is linked to insurance and guarantee. I chose this one because it's a bit less common, and I think it's very interesting to use for restoration. It's very interesting because, as Christophe said, forest and landscape restoration investment are seen as very risky investment. So a lot of investors don't dare actually investing, but you can put mechanism to reassure them. And this insurance and guarantee mechanism do exactly that because they de-risk restoration investment. What does that mean? It means that they are providing a security against political instability, market risk, or risk of non-payment. The beneficiary can be the FLR operators or the investor. So that's how we describe the mechanism. Then we have a case study for each of these mechanisms explaining how it works more precisely. For example, EcoPlanet Bamboo is a company that is restoring degraded lands, turning them into commercial bamboo plantation using the landscape approach. So that's what EcoPlanet Bamboo does. The thing is, they're doing it in country where you have a high political risk, such as Nicaragua or South Africa. So MIGA, the Multilateral Investment Guarantee Agency, is providing a $50 million US guarantee against this investment. It means that if EcoPlanet Bamboo is not successful, the investor will not lose all their money. A big part of their money will be returned to them thanks to this guarantee. Next. So once you look at the mechanism and how it can be good for FLR, we try to understand what are the success factors. So one of the success factors is that really you need to use this guarantee where you do have market failure and there is a need for this guarantee. The challenges for this one are, for example, the cost of the insurance, because when you take an insurance, you have to pay for it. And if it's a $50 million US insurance, you have to pay a significant amount of money to be covered. And the second important challenge for this is how to calculate the level of risk. It's different. It's very difficult to know how much this insurance should be, as we don't have a lot of other examples to be able to calibrate the cost of the insurance. The investor can be, we also have a section of what investor can be. So in this particular mechanism, they can be hedge fund or multilateral financial institution. And we also explain how investor can play a really key role. And in this run, they provide guarantee or they provide the insurance. Next one. So this is to present how, it's much more detail in the presentation, but a little bit the reasoning that we had into looking at all of this mechanism. And I really invite you to look at the presentation for that. But what's important is, next one, is that each of these financing mechanism is not really useful when it's used in isolation. Next. It has to be used in a coordinated way. And why? It's to meet the different stakeholder need. Previous one. To leverage adequate finance over time and across the landscape, and to spread the burden of investment risk. I'm sorry, there is a delay of when I see the slide. So can you put the next one? Yeah, thank you. And the next one. So basically you need to coordinate finance.
Matilda, okay?
I need to wrap up?
2 minutes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I'm sorry. So the coordination of finance can be, you can coordinate finance. So either you can use it at the same time, doing simultaneous financing, or sequential financing, using the different type of mechanism together or one after the other. And the two type really help. And I hope to give you a little bit more example about that in the question letter, or you have example in the publication. Next. Another really important part of what we saw is that if you really want your financing mechanism to work well, they need to be part of a landscape financing strategy, a long-term landscape financing strategy. And this can only be done if you build strong partnership within the stakeholder group and also between the stakeholder groups. So you need to have a vision and really look at all these mechanisms and how they fit in a long-term plan. Next. So the other two key lessons for success is that you need to think about your landscape plan as a business model. It cannot be just a plan and hoping to get grant funding. You really need to think about how you can make that sustainable in the long term and really looking at value chain, sustainable market to actually support your landscape. And the last point, which for me is really the key one, because that's when you see landscape that work well, it's because you do have a strong local ownership and champions. And building local capacity is key to be able to support emerging champions. So I hope with that you will be able to look at the publication next, at the publication that will explain you all this mechanism and really give you some idea about what's possible to finance FLR. And we'll also have an e-learning course that you can consult that will detail the presentation, the publication as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Matilda, for that really excellent overview of opportunities. And I think it will inspire everyone here to go to this publication and see the very many examples that are provided there, very concrete ones of where these diverse financing mechanisms have been applied. Let me next invite Katiela Musa, Regional Technical Advisor for the United Nations Capital Development Fund, to showcase another example that is included in this publication. His full bio can be found in the chat. Go ahead, Katiela.
Thank you very much, Sarah. I just want to echo what Mathilde said about the financial, the local financing mechanism and how to bring money down to the ground for the FLR. As you may know, UNCDF has a track record for the last 40 years in really applying local development fund to the natural resource management, food security, and climate change adaptation activities. And this is, a great opportunity between UNCDF and FAO to show how to really have this local financing mechanism work in the decentralized context. Next. So, to be really in phase with what Mathilde said, local development fund is one of the financing mechanisms together with the blended finance, which can really enhance the forest and landscape restoration mechanisms to contribute to the local economy. And this has some merits to really spell out. In terms of merits, you need to have the decentralization context to apply this local development fund, either through a local transfer, intergovernmental transfer, to incentivize the resource, mobilization of local finance, including the internal resource mobilization, and to really focus on the basic social services, local economy, natural resource management, food security, and women economic empowerment. So this tool is very well, really shown as a most concrete and adequate tool to really fit into the decentralization context in mostly the least developing countries. And we have this track record for that. Next. So it is a very complex and easy and user-friendly tool, because it is a multi-stakeholder, multi-partnership tool, but it is easy to use because it is grant-based very often. So there are many stakeholders around which are involved in this LDF, but it is quite documented that these stakeholders can work very closely to make it happen. Next. So you need to have, in terms of operational approach, you need to have a local strategic planning which can encompass local development plan. You need to have an annual investment plan and budget, And this might fit into maybe a performance-based grant system where you need to have a minimum condition and performance measure to top up the budget, or you need to use the LDF as a support budget with an investment and capacity building activities are a near marked. And this, in this case, it is a near marked situation where we use this local development fund to finance the FLR activities. Next. So this is a scheme that shows, concretely how it goes. In the particular context of our partnership with FAO, we went through the transfer to the regular national system, an amount of 160K, just to channel them to the local government account to implement this FLR activities with a support, technical assistance, and reporting support from many stakeholders, including national stakeholders, UN agencies, and also local communities and local stakeholders. Next. So we went through a couple of stepwise to really make it happen. We set up an operationalize what we call the FLRS landscape and FLR and income generating activity windows. So they went through the agreement between involved stakeholders, recruitment of technical assistance, setting up the earmarked funding windows, notifying the local budget and top it up, and agree on the turning plans with stakeholders. Next. So the second
Katia,
aspect.
just 1 minute. You have about 1 minute. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much, Sarah. So we also support the procurement process to the local government and the local stakeholders. Next. And as the last stage, we set up, an audit. We agree on the indicator to monitor to track the support and the FLR activities, and also put in place an audit system at the national level with the national funding agencies. So in terms of lesson learned, because it's very difficult to have this in 5 minutes to summarize all this support. Next slide, please. In terms of lesson learned, we learned that we need to clarify the role of engaged stakeholders, because this is a multi-partnership design that is really complicated because of the difference of tradition of business model between the actors involved. And we need also to design an integrated and synergetic action plan to support the beneficiaries. And also we need to apply harmonized procedures of engaged stakeholders, because we need to be sure that monies that are mobilized at the global level can be easily channeled to the local level without any impediments in terms of budget support. So in a nutshell, this is what I want to share in terms of excellent experience of our joint venture with FAO in the FLR mechanism in FAO. So over to you, back to you, Sarah. It is a very short presentation, but I can answer more questions about it. Thank you very much.
But very succinct and extremely interesting case example that others around the world can learn from. Let's hear now from Chadi Mohana, Director of the Ministry of Agriculture of Lebanon, about the example of a national program in that country that has been successfully supporting investment and restoration. You can find Chadi's full bio in the chat. Go right ahead.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you for the organizers and for the 300 participants that are still with us after this long day. Well, as Sarah said, we're going to be talking a little bit about the situation in Lebanon, and I would like to go to the next slide, please. Yes, maybe you know it already. Lebanon is facing at the present time a very critical situation. Beside the COVID pandemic, which is worldwide, we're having a big, severe economic crisis where the banking system that used to be the shining star of Lebanon is collapsing. The local currency has decreased by almost 90% of its value. And since we are an importer country, so import is getting very difficult and people are living in real poverty. Next slide, please. So People now, as I said, we import 80% of our food. So with this current situation, we are moving more and more to try to have some local production. And so this is leading to food insecurity. We're not talking about food safety anymore. We're talking more about food security. We need to have enough food for the population. So the farmers are planting more and more intensively, which is leading to soil degradation. With the high prices of the fuel, people are going more for deforestation, cutting wood in order to use it for heating. We're still in the winter season. And since we are not ready to import, or not able to import the forage for the animals, many shepherds are moving more and more for degrazing, and it's leading to overgrazing. All these factors, all combined together, are leading to more and more social conflicts. Next, please. So
just
basically,
2 more minutes, okay?
Yeah. So basically, it is not exactly the best time for FLR financing, because the priorities of the donors, the priorities of the country are shifting toward poverty alleviation, creating food security, and the basic needs. However, we should be enough clever to turn this situation into an opportunity when we manage to combine altogether the environmental priorities and the natural resource management with the needs of the communities. I mean by that, we can find funds for restoration, but taking into account the needs of the community, like going for non-wood forest products, aromatic plants, these kind of substitutes that can be used by the population to get his food security. Next, please. So we have many stakeholders, all people that are living from the forest, the communities, the carob producers, beekeepers, etc. I will not go too much into those details. Next, please. So the sources, the classic source of funding that we had here are the individuals that were very keen to restore, to plant forest trees, CSOs, crowdfundings, the banks, unfortunately they are suffering now, and essentially the diaspora that are very attached to Lebanon and that are willing to help the country. And since they are a diaspora, it means that they can provide us with fresh money, what we call the fresh money, which is the dollars or euros coming from abroad. Next, please. The potential solution, and this is Christophe mentioned that with the FLR program, we are trying to create the National Forest Fund, which has a main objective of attracting the donors, whether they are at the national level or the international one, compile and manage those funds, and then coordinate with the implementers of the National Forest Planning, which is the Ministry of Agriculture and other partners. Unfortunately, this fund has suffered from bureaucracy, all the connections between the Ministry of Finance, the central bank, and other agencies, where there was kind of lack of trust in the public sector. And then the economic situation made things more critical. Next, please. So at the end, how to try to benefit from the current situation and to make the linkage between what we are doing now and the new publication. Well, in fact, you can see in this publication that there are new ideas to use in a much more efficient way our National Forest Fund and other FLR funding beyond the classic way of doing things through grants. So we need to go in the sense of setting some microloans options. We have some startups that are being created and they need those microloans, and then some are producing pine nuts, some are producing carob molasses, essential oils, very small businesses, but they can grow and can help the country go through this crisis. Establishing new credit lines for FLR and associated guarantee mechanism, as Mathilde just explained it, and which was very interesting proposal to be taken into consideration. Then the value chain development, and I said that it would be very essential to go for the non-wood forest product in the forest management plans to be produced and implemented. And at the end, setting up the payment for ecosystemic schemes, which are very important. And to finish, what is very important is to combine all those options to get very good results. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much, Shadi. That was really fascinating and shows the complementarity between what is happening at national level and at local level. We have just a couple minutes that I'd like to use to ask our different speakers a follow-up question and ask them to see if you can respond in just 30 seconds or no. I know we started a little bit late, but I think this has been really, really rich, and just see if we can get your ideas for us into just a few succinct responses. Christoph, let me go first to you. These are hard times for everyone, and Shadi was just talking a little bit about that. Face-to-face meetings are problematic. What kind of innovative tools and methods are being used to address capacity development needs on finance for FLR?
Thank you, Sarah. Yes, we had to adapt the way we are working during the last months with the pandemic. And of course, we developed new products, or we intensify our effort on several products. I would like to mention the fact that we decided to develop much more e-learning courses in 2020-2021. We are currently working on several courses to be released by end of 2021 on basic FLR knowledge, on FLR monitoring, and of course we launched this week three modules on FLR finance, and we will continue this effort to develop e-learning course on FLR. We also invested more time online in online knowledge sharing products with the organization of multiple thematic webinars on FLR finance, payment for ecosystem services schemes in the context of our community of practice on FLR finance. And finally, we are also developing a partnership with UNEP Finance Initiative and Bridge 4 Billion, and we are trying to pilot a mentorship platform named the Restoration Factory, which is a kind of online incubator aiming at supporting the preparation of bankable projects at landscape level for entrepreneurs that have in mind to develop a restoration project based on a particular value chain. This activity is done in the context of the Restoration Initiative thematic program funded by Jeff, but it is a very promising way to work and provide online support, mentorship support to local stakeholders. Hopefully it will work. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you so much. Let me ask you, Matilda, just one quick question. Is there one best financial instrument to mobilize at the landscape scale?
No, I think Sarah, as Shadi mentioned as well, we really need to coordinate all of them. And just to give an example, very often actually we keep saying private sector needs to be more engaged. We need to have very good private project in which we can invest, private sector project, and this is difficult to actually have investor going straight to give equity or even loans. And so you can mix it with some grants, as the French GEF is doing it. They are doing some technical assistance, technical assistance in form of grants to small SMEs, so that they can be at technically good and good enough for investment, where then the loan part and the equity investment can come. And I really think this is the future, how you can actually mix the different mechanisms.
Fantastic. And it's very exciting. I want to work with you in the future on that, Matilda. Let me turn to you, Katiela. In just a few seconds, what is key from your perspective to have effective restoration window in communal and district budgets? What's the bottom line?
Thank you very much, Sarah. As you may know, all the countries where decentralization has been implemented. So the process is to transfer the responsibility of natural resource management and green investment to the local governments. So it is quite important to transfer the ownership of both planning and implementing of the FLR to this local level. And this must be the best avenue for the FLR to really fructify, to be sure that this kind of investment are really implemented at the local level in terms of ownership and improving and enhancing local economy.
Thank you very much. That's great. And just a last question, if you could answer in just a half a minute, Chadi, based on your experience with operationalizing the National Forest Fund in Lebanon, what is one or two key challenges to address to successfully establish a national pipeline, so financial resources for restoration can get to landscape and municipal level? Just half a minute.
Yeah, well, in fact, Sarah, I just mentioned it in one of the slides, is the trust. Because, you know, if you want to get funds from someone, they need to trust what you are doing. And so by working with FLR, we have shown a lot of good experience, a lot of good success stories. And this is building more and more trust between the public sector and the private sector, as well with the international organization. Showing success stories is one key issue to be taken into consideration for creating trust with the other partners. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you very much. Well, this was really an inspiring session for me. I've been working on this, trying to crack this nut of landscape finance for a long time, and this is really a huge advance in the way that we're thinking about and acting on this process. I take away three messages. First of all, landscape restoration requires a wide range of different kinds of investment implemented by farmers and businesses and local governments, NGOs and communities. And these need to be coordinated to achieve transformation at the landscape scale and real benefits to local livelihood and nature. Secondly, we do require new forms of public, private, and civic finance to meet this challenge. While the total level of financing is indeed huge, we can't handle huge flows of funds going into huge mega projects in sectoral ways. There needs to be a mechanism for distributing these funds, making them available at the local level, and that's going to require some new kinds of financial instruments. Third, we're beginning to see these large volumes of funding going at the national and international level to address issues like public, private, and philanthropic, to address climate change, biodiversity, post-COVID recovery, healthy watersheds, a wide range of things. This case experience in this report demonstrates the potential and the viability to direct such funds not to these big projects, but to the numerous local investments for landscape restoration that are developed by local landscape partnerships. So good luck to all of you in your own efforts to mobilize forest and landscape restoration for healthy people and planet. Please stay on, if you would, for just 1 minute more to answer a couple of questions that we have. I leave you with the invitation also to complete the survey on UN Decade of Ecosystem Restoration, which is called Taking Stock of Global Capacity for Ecosystem Restoration. This will help us identify the needs to achieve global restoration. And the survey is available in English, French, Spanish, Portuguese, Chinese, Arabic, and Russian. So I'll close here now. If you would stay on for just another minute and fill in a set of questions. It's just 3. What is your background profession? Why did you attend this meeting and what were you expecting? And do you want to learn more by becoming a member of the Forest Landscape Restoration Finance Community of Practice? We welcome you to do so. Have a wonderful International Day of Forests, celebrate together, and much good luck in all the good work that you all are doing on the ground. And big hand for all of our speakers who were fantastic. Thank you.